All right, guys. So we shot this. Well, we had this live in session kind of class for hidden costs as it relates to utilities and infrastructure. This is a big one. We had a lot of people come and a lot of questions came afterwards. And unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties as it relates to our video recording and going on YouTube and whatnot. So people asked for us to redo it so that way they can get this valuable information, and we're happy to do it. And I hope you guys like it. So I'm going to try and spin through this. And unfortunately, there won't be a platform for you to be able to ask questions on Zoom or in person. But if you have any questions, comment below and we'll get back to you that way. Or you can reach out to us at libertyinvestments.net and we can go through any kind of personal, professional projects that you guys got and go from there. So anyways, let's see here. Why is this working? There we go. All right. So middle housing, we've gone through a 12-month series. We've talked so far about month one, introductions, property owner opportunities, financing, navigating zoning and permitting, designing, construction and cost control. This month, we're talking about infrastructure and utilities. This is a really big one, especially as you're looking at infill projects. So this is a really important topic. Like I've mentioned many times before, zoning is only one very tip of the iceberg. So we're looking at below the water level here at the public works standards, which is what we're talking about with utilities. Those are specifically public work requirements. So these are the things that, really impact a project. If you want more information after the fact, or you want to find out where to find this video or other videos, you can scan the QR code or go to the YouTube channel, and we've got a lot of different videos there talking about all different types of processes as it relates to middle housing construction, small infill development, and stuff like that. All right, so we're going to be talking about sewer lines, water hookups, storm, drainage, power, all the things that really make or break a project. And so stay tuned as we go through those for more information. All right, so if you don't know what infrastructure means, if this is kind of a newer topic for you, infrastructure is really the public road around the property that you want to develop. And so a lot of people seem to get confused sometimes when there's a sidewalk and then you got the planter strip and think that that's their property. In reality, the back of the sidewalk, which is up against your property line, is really where your property line starts and the public property begins. And so sidewalk, landscape strips, all of the street work obviously is all public, but everything that is utility wise in the street, those things are going to be public, and your private property that goes into the public sector with all your power and water and sewer and whatnot is really where you need to look at for hookups and infrastructure upgrades. All right, so in every city, you have different requirements. So the city of Kirkland's requirements are different than the city of Bellevue. They're different in the city of Redmond. They're different in the city of Issaquah. So one thing that's really important is making sure you're working with a good team that's vetted, that has worked in multiple different jurisdictions, who understands the process, who can ask the right questions to make sure you get good answers, to make sure that you're going to get the response and information that you need to make sure you're designing a project that's going to be acceptable when submitted to that city. All right, so common requirements. So when you're doing infill middle housing type projects, if you're not tearing one house down to replace it with one more, you may have to do utility main extensions, because what was one house is now going to be 3, 4, or more. And so that may mean that you're going to have to upgrade the sewer, you're going to have to upgrade the storm, you're going to have to upgrade the power transformer, you're going to have to bring gas to the property if you want to do that. So these are things that are common requirements, definitely things that you want to look at. And how much does that cost, and how long is it going to take, and how much does that impact the project financially to make it either not make sense or it still makes sense because the property can absorb those costs. Doing these works is going to create traffic control. You're going to have to do pavement restoration and whatnot. So just some things that to really think about as you're developing a property. All right, so as far as permitting and review agencies go, you're going to be working with multiple different agencies within the city or jurisdiction as you're talking about infrastructure and right-of-way improvements specific to that one project. And that is not including all the other things. So you're going to be working with the city planning department, which is going to include public works, which is going to include fire, which is going to include the utilities. And sometimes the utilities are not always within the city. They're within a different jurisdiction. So you may be doing, like, for example, if you're in the city of Kirkland and you're building in the city of Kirkland, but you're in Fan Hill or Juanita, you're going to have to work with North Shore Utility District, which is going to serve that lot, which is within that city, which is going to be your sewer and your water, but your gas is going to come from PSC and your power is going to come from PSC. And so you may be submitting a project for city approval, and you may not know that you have to actually submit a different set of plans to the utility district, which is going to review and approve and sign off on the utilities that the city doesn't actually manage. So sometimes people get this wrong. We've had people come to us and be like, hey, I got this project. And I was like, oh, well, did you talk with Woodinville Water? Did you talk with North Shore Utility District? Did you talk with these other jurisdictions that is not within the city, but kind of part of the whole project? And so knowing what to ask, how to be able to get through it is super important. All right, so this is typical public work department requirements. This is for specifically the city of Kirkland. You can see they're very checklist oriented to make sure that you're submitting everything that they are requiring, and that you're going to be making sure it's a full, complete application as they receive it, and that you're not going to have to go a lot of back and forth with the city or the reviewer to provide the information that they're requiring. So this checklist shows if you're working in public works, which is every time, you're going to need a set of civil drawings. You're going to need a stormwater drainage plan. You're going to have to do right-of-way improvement plan, erosion and sediment control, your sewer availability, which may come from a different jurisdiction, your water availability, which may come from a different jurisdiction also. Your stormwater, your TIR, which is your construction stormwater pollution plan. Public works departments also include your soils report and your public works improvement plan. So like this is a lot if you're working in just one project in the street. Think everything that's in the street has soil, has utilities, has different setbacks and spacing, different capacities, and you're wanting to build something on your lot that may or may not be able to, withstand whatever the current infrastructure has available for that water or for sewer or downstream analysis, how that's going to impact that specific storm in the street. So these are all things that you have to consider as you're working through your project. All right, water metering and fire flow. So if you have a project that is in Seattle, or you got one in Kirkland, or you got one in Bellevue, or you got one in Redmond, or whatever, just know that like your water capacity, especially even street by street, the pressure of water that's in the street is going to be different. And if you're adding 4 or 5 homes on one lot, you want to make sure that you're actually going to be able to get enough water to each unit based off of what the requirements are, based off of the numbers of bedrooms and bathrooms, and also based off of fire flow requirements. And so like if you're building 4 or 5 homes, you may need to go from a 3/4 inch water meter from what was an existing house to a 1 inch water meter, and then add 1 inch water meter for each individual unit. And usually you want to keep separate water meters for each individual unit, because that way your billing is separate and you're not talking with your neighbors, you're not sub-metering things off. It's a little more expensive, but for the end user, if it's going to be a for sale product, is actually better for the customer that's buying that unit. And it's just easier for tracking and everything else. So yeah, as we talked about, you may need to install a new water line, which extending water depending on where it's at, where it starts and stops in the street. If you have one long private spaghetti line that's going all the way down with an easement through your neighbors to be able to tap into the water main, you may now have to bring that water main all the way up to the corner of your lot to be able to service those 4 or 5 additional homes that you're bringing onto your lot. And so accounting for that cost, how deep it is, what kind of pressure and capacity there is there, do you have to add any more fire hydrants or anything like that, are things that you're going to want to definitely look at. All right, sewer capacity. kind of the same thing. One house, one sewer. If you're doing like a tear down of an existing house and you're just adding one additional house on top, so you're removing one and you're adding one back on, you may not need to do any kind of sewer extensions or upgrades or anything like that. But you really want to do a sewer scope of the existing private sewer line that goes into the public sewer line in the street to make sure that it's still in good condition, that you don't need to, like for example, if you're in Seattle and you've got like a big route that's going right through the sewer, or it's cracked or it's collapsed or whatever, you're not going to be able to salvage that by doing a relining of the sewer. You're probably going to have to cut into the street, replace that whole private sewer line that goes into the sewer main, which comes with additional costs, and you got to patch the street, and you got different permits that you got to do and all that stuff. So, tearing one house down and putting one house up, I would say make sure you're doing a sewer scope to make sure that like that is going to be able to be reused after you line it. And if it's not, account for the cost of retapping and replacing that private sewer line. Same goes with for if you're tearing one house down and you're putting 4 or 5 homes or more on one lot. Some different cities have different capacities for how many units you can fit on one private sewer line. So if you've got, one house you're tearing down and you've got, let's just call it 8 houses going up on this new lot, in the city of Seattle, you can put 8 units onto one 6-inch private sewer line that goes into the street. But in Redmond, you can only get 4 units on one sewer line. So you may have 2 tandem private sewer lines that are running side by side, probably in the driveway somewhere, and you're doing twice the amount of work than you would if you're in a different jurisdiction. So just making sure that you understand that. Also, the topography of your lot. So if you have your street that's right here, and you've got a house. Sorry, if you've got a house that's right here, you got a lot and you want to build it, obviously all your sewer lines are up here in the street. And so if you want to build on this lot down here, you're going to have to pump up your sewer and your storm water up to the mains right here, which means that you're going to have to also, make sure you have a pump for that. You're going to have a backup generator, because if the power goes out, you don't want all your shit rolling downhill back into the crawl space or anything like that. And so these are all things that you got to really think about, which then add additional costs. All right, so latecomer agreements. Latecomer agreements are when a developer or builder improves a piece of property and you benefit from it. So for example, let's say you're on a septic system on a piece of property, and then a builder develops a lot down the street from you, and they have to drag the sewer line through the street and up to the property that they're developing. And then you, like a year or 2 later, build a house, or 2 or 3 or whatever. You benefited from them bringing that sewer line to their house, because now you can get your house off septic and you can tap your 1 new house or 4 new houses into that sewer line. And so a latecomers agreement may be recorded on title, which specifically says, hey, you need to pay us for the costs that you are now benefiting from. Power capacity. So power, obviously you need to make sure you've got enough power to make sure your washer and your dryer and your appliances and your lights and all of your security system and everything else is working. But if one house is getting torn down and you're putting 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, whatever up, you may have to upgrade the transformers, which are on the power lines, or the power poles, which you probably see are like those gray circular things hanging there. Those are called transformers, and you see some that are on the ground in the street that you may have if the power's underground as well. And you need to make sure that you have enough power capacity, just like you would for water or sewer or gas or any of that other stuff, because you may have to upgrade that. And especially during COVID, with the chips and the shipping and everything getting back ordered, you had to really make sure you planned long lead times for that. So, it may have taken like 12 to 14 months or longer to be able to get a transformer if you wanted to build out a project. So getting ahead of those things and making sure that you're not just sitting complete without power because that chews into your interest of something that you can't convert to a sale or a rental is really important. So considering these things, the long lead times, how long does it take? When can we order these? Do we need to upgrade the power lines? These are all things that you want to make sure that you're doing. especially because your capacity now is probably going to be a lot higher given the EV chargers and other things that you have to, have a requirement as a part of these projects now. Case in point, supply shortages, power capacity delays, long-term shortages, cost requirements. So, make sure you're always looking at the utilities and the infrastructure and, what those impacts are as it relates specifically to that project. Street dedication. Let me see. Hold on. So street dedication. I'm going to skip forward for a minute because I think we have a slide that shows exactly what street dedication is. But if you'll see, like, some lots will go out into a private road and it shows on title that they've got a bigger lot, but then when you redevelop, you actually have to dedicate a part of your property to that city or jurisdiction. That's basically you giving your property away for free to be able to upgrade whatever the city or jurisdiction has requirements for their comp plan updates. So let me see if I can find a photo of that because that's up here. I'm going to skip ahead for a minute. Wow, we got a lot here. Here you go. Here you go. This is right-of-way improvement. So you can see this red section here. You can see how the line to the left jogs down, which goes into the street, which then cuts over to the corner on the right-hand side and then goes back up. So that whole section, that red section there, you're going to have to dedicate to the city, which means that on title, that property looks like it's got a larger lot, but in reality, it's a much smaller lot because you're going to have to dedicate that section of property to the city, and then your lot will be smaller. You have to put in the curb gutter and sidewalk, and so that affects your total FAR calculation, your impervious surface, and everything else that you have to do for your number of units you can fit and all that stuff. So definitely something to look out for. Let's go back. I'm going to try and speed things up here. I got about 13 minutes left on this thing. Oh, here we go. Utilities are a feasibility driver, not afterthoughts. So obviously, always, you have a piece of property you want to build, always, always, always look at the utilities first and foremost. Does it make sense? Are they at the lot? If not, how much is it going to cost to bring it there? Do you need to upgrade it? Things like that. Yeah, so here, this is just kind of a additional to the previous slide. So utility availabilities, make sure you get those, confirm that you can, get the depth in the street to, if you have to tap in, like how far down is it? Preliminary stormwater analysis. Yeah, make sure you got a lot of contingency in there for upgrades. All right, so this is a really good photo. You can see that there is what's called a trench box. This is a big blue box that provides access to this worker to be able to get down inside of a hole, and you can see a big old pile of dirt on his left-hand side there. That's holding back the dirt, so he can get down into that sewer line or whatever that is down there. It looks like a sewer line, to be able to do his work. That is a very expensive amount of work that you got to do. You got to dig that hole, you got to put the trench box in, you got to get to the sewer, and then depending on how long you got to do that, and you have to trench that all the way out for, I don't know, 100 feet, 200 feet. That's a lot of work. Then you got to have all that dirt, you got to be able to put some back, you got to compact it, you got to, there's a whole process to it. And you probably are going to have to either maybe replace the soil or, bring in new soil, and you got to bring in a bunch of drain rock. It's a lot. So if you got to do an extension or utility upgrades, looking at the depth of the utility in the street is really going to impact the cost, which is going to impact the cost of the project. Yeah, so you can see on the right-hand side how deep the utility is. On the left-hand side, you can see it's really shallow. That's basically the maybe like, I don't know, 3.5 feet or something like that. You can see that the trench is only about the height of the guy's waist. If he's about a 6-foot guy, you're about, 3 feet, 3.5 feet, something like that. So that's much cheaper than having to do the trench boxes and everything else. If you don't know the depth of the utilities in the street, you can do what's called potholing. So you'll basically dig a hole after your surveyor provides the location of where utilities are, and you're basically going to try and slowly dig a hole to a point where you can get to a spot where you can see where the utilities are, and you'll basically measure how deep that is, and then you can do your math and say, okay, if it's 3 feet, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if it's 14 feet, where I'm going to have to dig down super deep, and you got all the export and the import and the trench boxes, and then you got to do that for 100 feet down the road. So one's going to be more or less expensive. Okay, so yeah, reusing utilities. I talked about this earlier. So if you've got an existing house and you're just replacing it with a new one, you can reuse a lot of the existing services. You got power, you got water, you got sewer, you got gas. You can usually just like tear down, tap into, and reuse. If that house was smaller and you got a big old house going on there, you may have to upgrade the water just for all the additional bedrooms and bathrooms and things like that. People that are going to be using it, but it's much cheaper, obviously, than adding 5-6 homes on it. But if you've got a really big lot and you're putting 5-6 homes on it, the value may be more beneficial to put those 5 or 6 homes than just putting one home on it. It just really depends on where you're at and the values and the costs and the time. Yeah, so here's a really important thing. If you can reuse the sewer line, make sure you can. If you're tearing down and reusing, even if you're tearing down one house and you're reusing the sewer line, and you can put 4 homes on one existing sewer, super important, especially if, like you can see right here on the right hand side, you got a cobblestone street. If this was in Seattle, they have some areas specifically that say that you cannot cut or trench into that street because it's a historical street. They want to maintain its character. And so if you got to get back in there, you can't, or you're going to have a lot more costs to be able to add new cobblestones and all this other stuff. So something to look into as well. Here's an example of, on the left-hand side, this would be like roots going into a sewer system, which is cracking it, which is making it leak. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that it's this is a lining of the sewer line. So basically kind of like inside out puts in like this PVC pipe that has got epoxy on the outside, and then they pressurize it and it goes to the outside of the pipe, and that basically turns it into a new pipe. So it's pretty cool, actually. You should check it out. Yeah, so one other thing that you can do to be able to make things a little bit cheaper is to cluster your utilities together. So if you've got, like 4 homes, don't run 4 separate private sewer lines. You're going to have to do that for water, and you're going to have to do that for gas and all that stuff, but you can combine your sewer lines onto one private sewer, so all 4 will come into one, and then that one will go into the street rather than 4 different taps in the street. That's going to cut down on your costs. And if you can cluster your utilities together in one trench versus 4 or 5 different trenches, that's going to cut down on all your different costs on trenching that many more times. So if you can, make sure you can plan everything so it's more efficient to cut down on your costs. Here's an example of just clustering. Anytime you have any kind of utilities going in one trench, you have separations that are required for different types. For example, you have to have a separation between your electricity and your water. Everyone knows that water and electricity don't mix well, so you have to have a certain separation between them, so that way you don't, create any issues between, if there was, I don't know, like some kind of little mole or something like that chews on the electric line or something. You don't want that to happen, obviously. Not that it would, but you gotta have separation. Financial planning. Make sure you have a lot of your utility costs front loaded. Depending on the type of loan you do, the type of lender that you do, they may not allow for the cost of doing all your infrastructure improvements. If you're doing a plat, for example, before you get your final plat approval for you to get your building permits. So you need to factor in, like, how are you going to pay for all of that if it's not something you can wrap into the loan? Or what kind of loan do you have to make sure it is wrapped into the loan? Yeah, so here's a couple case studies. Single family lot, you could do a duplex and 2 ADUs. You got to upgrade the sewer line, upsize the sewer. You got to put a storm vault in. Transformer upgrade was required. Utility cost extension was 180 grand. So these are all things that you have to factor in before you even really start building the unit itself. This is the right-of-way improvement I was talking about earlier. You may have to upgrade the utilities, you're losing your private property here. You can see this big red section you're going to lose, which you're going to then have to upgrade this whole like curb gutter and sidewalk. You can see in the upper right-hand corner that sidewalk kind of stops right there. Well, when you start developing this lot, you're going to have to bring that sidewalk all the way down and all the way through, and then connect it over here on the lower left-hand side. So just make sure you got that factored in. And then also on a corner lot, if you're gonna do that work, that's additional concrete, and some jurisdictions will include that concrete surface square footage as a part of your stormwater calculation, which will then increase your detention tank that you may have to put on site. So just be aware of that. Here is another case study of a property owner that we were working with who bought this property on the left, subject property, to put 6 units on, and didn't realize that there's a private drive aisle to be able to get access to the property, which doesn't have sewer or because the house is currently on septic, and so you're going to have to upgrade the utilities on that subject lot to add those 6 homes. And if you do that, and all the other properties around it are also gaining access on the private drive, then you'll need to be able to get their agreement or permission to upgrade the private drive aisle because everyone else has an interest in it. And so just something to consider. Also, dragging your utilities from the street on the right to the subject property and the cost and time of that, you just really want to factor that into the financial viability of that project. All right, yeah, reiterating the due diligence importance. So making sure that you understand the system or the process, I guess, more so, in working with the jurisdiction that you're working with, because you don't want to have your project just sitting because you just don't know what you don't know, and so you're having to kind of work through the whims of what the city's telling you to do. So always make sure you're working with good consultants and contractors, and you have a good plan in place to make sure you don't have delays, which then add to additional costs specifically to the project. All right, so the key takeaways here: make sure you're working with an expert. If you're going to work with an architect, you're going to work with a civil engineer, you're going to work with somebody like us at Liberty Investments. Working with somebody who has a track record working with that jurisdiction and that city, and also their consultants are working with that jurisdiction or that city. They have personal relationships and with the staff, and they can kind of confidently tell you what's happening, versus like bringing a guy from Idaho and having him work in Seattle. They've never done anything in Idaho. They're going to have to work through the kinks, and that's going to cost more time, and they don't have the relationships, and there may be additional rounds of review and things like that. All right, so yeah, us at Liberty Investments, we've been working on development projects for combined 25 years. Our general contractor, who's our partner, has been in business for 20 years. I've been in the construction industry and development space for 15 years. And so through that combined, we're really working on a lot of different projects in a lot of different areas and got a lot of different experiences that can bring that to the property owner to make sure that we can set you up with a good business plan to make sure that we're looking out for your best interest and getting you to the end result that you're looking for, which is really maximizing your returns. So if you are not aware, we have a pre-feasibility study that we provide through Liberty Investments. If you go to www.liberty-investments.net, you can click on the pre-feasibility tab there. This is everything that's included that's in your pre-feasibility. It gives you a good, quick look before you leap, early look at what's financially viable for my project, what's not, what are some risks that I got to look out for, what should I do, what should not I do, what makes sense, what provides the best return. And that is an early look, so that way you know that you're setting yourself up on the right foot as you work through that project. And then if you decide you want to work through that project, then we will manage that full process for you from start to finish, end to end, and provide a white glove service. Here's what's included in your pre-feasibility. This is also on our website, but you can see that we look at the parcel data, the quarter section map. We're looking at how many units you can get there, the code, market studies, how many other projects are going to be around. You don't want to oversaturate the market. What's your goal? Are you going to build them to rent? Are you building them to sell? Are you doing a combo of the two? We're looking at financial underwriting, like what's it cost? How long is it going to take? What's the return? Stuff like that. This is a continuation of what's included. All right, and so the pre-feasibility is not a full feasibility. So you got to think about the survey and the arborist and the oil consultant and the geotech and getting a wetland study if you have it, and the architect and a traffic study. So we're seeing a benefit from different types of industry professionals. Land use attorneys have a client who maybe wants to do something with their land. That client with that attorney doesn't understand the cost, the risk, the utilities, the density, any of that kind of stuff. So that land use attorney is recommending Liberty Investments to help with their clients, and we're working with that attorney with that client to work through the project. Same thing with architects. Architects have a client that comes to them. They have a want or a desire to build and develop their lot. They maybe don't understand what the density is, what the market really wants, what the cost is, what the risks are. And so that architect is getting connected with Liberty Investments. Liberty is then working with that architect's client. We're working together to get through that project. From a lender's perspective, a lender wants to lend to somebody who actually is a vetted individual who has built and developed projects before. And if you're maybe somebody who's got a rental property who had one home before, and now you want to build 3, 4, 5 homes on that one lot because now you can, that lender is going to be hesitant to be able to give you a loan at such a large dollar value if you've never built and developed or have a track record doing it. So lenders are working with us by bringing their clients to Liberty Investments because we're managing the entitlements, we're managing the feasibility, we're running all the construction, we're working with the lender on their draw requests, and that's a benefit for the lender. It also de-risks their portfolio, and also it helps the client get through a project in a more streamlined fashion. Real estate brokers, they have clients with property that maybe want to build, they want to carve off a portion of their lot, they want to sell, they don't understand the value, so they're coming to us for our pre-feasibility study to help them understand what can be possible on their lot, what that means from a builder's perspective, how much it costs, how much the time takes, and things like that. Private wealth advisors, same thing. They've got a client who they're looking at their whole client's portfolio. Their client's portfolio includes multiple real estate assets. Now those lots can allow for 4, 5, 6 homes on that lot. And that client with that property doesn't understand how to be able to get through that. But at the end of the day, if that client builds and develops and sells or rents off some of those homes, that creates more of an asset. That creates more assets under management. Sometimes those units will be sold, which will create a capital event, and that capital will then go back to the private wealth advisor to put into the market and manage for that client. Property owners, they've heard things in the news, they've talked with the city, they don't understand what they can do, and so they come to us and we manage the whole process for them while they are working their regular job or whatever else. Real estate attorneys or estate attorneys, same thing. Maybe you have a property owner or an estate that's liquidating assets, or they're trying to maximize the assets benefit, and so they are reaching out to us to help maximize the total return for the estate because they have a property that has a higher and better use than what it currently has. Real estate investors, we got people who are buying lots. They don't understand, they're first-time investors. They want to be able to build and develop something. They've never done it before. They're asking for us to help guide them through that process. That's the same thing with the potential buyers and purchases for some real estate investors. Small scale builders, a lot of builders, they just want to build and develop, and they don't really want to manage all the entitlements and stuff like that. So they're having us do that for them. And then developers working in new areas, maybe they are working in one specific area. They have not worked in another area. And so they're asking for us and the expertise, having experience with the jurisdiction or the consultants to be able to help kind of guide them through that project. So these are quite a few people that are referring people to us that we're working with to help make the process a little bit more smooth for them. After you have a pre-feasibility, we'll set up a meeting with you. We'll have a whole file that shows everything that we've provided. We'll go over what we feel is the highest and best use, what makes sense, what doesn't, the reasons why, some of the risks and whatnot. And then you can kind of take it back and process it and understand what you want to do. Maybe talk with some family members or whatever you decide. And then we will get you going on the next steps if that's what you decide you want to do. So here's just some of the things that we do to deliver results. This is what a typical project timeline looks like. One timeline is not the same for all of them. This is, I would say, a pretty standard one that could be used on a lot of smaller infill projects, which would be 3 to probably 10 units. Start with a call, you do the initial pre-feasibility. You're going to have to go through all the other feasibility items that were not included in the pre-feasibility, such as survey and geotech and civil engineering review, a pre-submittal conference, title review, and other things like that. If everything still looks good and you want to move forward, then we'll do the project kickoff. We'll do the prelim design, start working with the the architects and the civil engineers and pulling that whole package together, putting that submittal packet together. After we get everything submitted to the city, we'll start pulling together some designers and get some specs in place. What kind of roofing, what kind of color of paint, what kind of tile, what kind of cabinets, countertops, all the stuff, getting that all dialed in. Then after we have our project submittal pretty close to getting to issuance for approvals, we'll have that spec design put together and priced out with the contractor. Excuse me. And then we will get forward towards permit issuance. After permit issuance is ready, we'll handle the financing. We'll work with you, with the lender, to make sure that we've got a good bought out budget, that we're helping manage that process for you, and that we're going to be managing the draw requests for you as well, because this may be something that you've never done before. Through the construction, we're going to have oversight throughout the whole property, the whole project, to make sure that things are on time, on budget, being managed well, looking after your best interest as the property owner. And then all right, if you guys are curious about your property, what you can do with it, or maybe you have a client who's got a piece of property and they're not understanding, or maybe they need a little help along the way, you can scan the QR code here to be able to go to our website, or you can sign up for a pre-feasibility there and reach out to us. Here's our contact information with our website, our email, and our phone number. We look forward to working with you and serving you with more information, and hopefully you guys find this valuable. See you on the next one.